October 4th, 1949, Small's Paradise, 7th Avenue. A man named Vincent Corsaro flipped a silver coin at Bumpy Johnson's table. He told him to call it. The band stopped between numbers. 40 people saw it happen. A coin spinning in cigarette smoke over a white tablecloth in a room that had gone quiet. Heads or tails for Harlem. That was the joke. Bumpy Johnson did not call it. He caught the coin in the air. He set it down on the tablecloth. Then he reached into his vest pocket and took out a coin of his own. An old silver dollar. Worn smooth. A small X filed across the eagle's wing. He placed it in Corsaro's palm and closed the man's fingers around it. 30 days, he said. That was all. 30 days later, 9 men were gone from Harlem. Not one of them was harmed. 9 men who collected. 9 men who leaned on bankers and pushed corner boys and took a cut of every dime that moved above 110th Street. 9 men with cars and lawyers and downtown protection. Gone. 1 to a courthouse. 1 to a pier. 1 to a boat that did not come back. 2 to a newspaper column. The rest to places nobody bothered to ask about. And on the 30th night, that same silver dollar came home. It landed on a tablecloth at Small's Paradise with a sound like a dropped key. So what was the coin? What did a filed silver dollar do that guns could not? And why did 9 grown men, all of them armed, all of them backed by families downtown, walk away from the richest streets in Black America because of it? To understand that, we have to go back to a barbershop in Charleston, back to a boy who watched his father count change. Harlem in 1949 did not know it was living in a golden hour. That is the way with golden hours. Nobody notices the light until it is gone. Lenox Avenue at dusk, the streetlights buzzing to life one by one like they were clearing their throats. Fried whiting and hot grease drifting out of a kitchen door on 7th. Number slips folded small and passed palm to palm on 135th Street. The click of pool balls through an open window. Brownstones with iron railings still warm from the afternoon. Old men playing checkers on a crate outside Blumstein's, arguing about a move made in 1946. A Cadillac idling on 142nd with the radio low. And money, real money, moving. The policy game was the heartbeat of that neighborhood. People called it the numbers. 3 digits, a penny to play. $1 could buy you a dream that lasted until the afternoon paper came out, 600 to 1 if you hit. The money stayed local. That was the point. It went out of a kitchen and into a runner's hand and into a banker's satchel and back out again as rent, tuition, a coat, a funeral, a storefront. It was not clean. Nobody in Harlem pretended it was clean, but it was theirs. That was the thing downtown could never understand. Ellsworth Raymond Johnson was 44 years old that autumn. Most people never used the first 2 names. They called him Bumpy for a knot on the back of his head he had carried since childhood. He was not a large man. He wore good suits without seeming to care about them. He read constantly, chess books, poetry, the Amsterdam News front to back, including the church notices. He had a way of listening that made people talk longer than they meant to. And he had a rule about noise. Noise was for men who were not sure of themselves, and that was how he put it. A man who has to raise his voice is negotiating with himself, not with you. He had come home from a federal cell not long before. He had married Mamie Hatcher the year prior. He had a daughter he adored and a wife who saw straight through him. He also had a problem. The problem had a name, and the name was arithmetic. Since the 30s, the policy banks of Harlem had been paying a tax to interest downtown. It was called protection. Everybody knew what it actually was. For years, the number was survivable. Ugly, but survivable. In September of 1949, the number changed. The message came up on a Tuesday. It came through a man in a camel coat who did not take off his hat indoors. The tax was going up, and there was a second condition. That second condition was the part that mattered. Deacon Willie Boyd brought the news to the back room of a barber shop on 141st Street. Deacon was 61. He had run numbers since Prohibition and had never once been arrested, which in that business was a kind of sainthood. He carried a hymnal in his coat pocket. He kept a pencil behind his ear. He did his sums in the margins of the Book of Psalms, and he was never wrong by a nickel. He sat down heavy. He set the hymnal on the table. "They want 35, he said. 35%, said Junebug Cassell. Junebug drove. He was 29, built like a door frame, and he chewed peppermints because he had quit cigarettes for a woman who had since married a dentist. He smelled like peppermint and motor oil. You always knew when Junebug entered a room. 35, Deacon said again, off the top before payouts. That's not a tax, Junebug said. That's a swallow. There's more, Deacon said. He took the pencil from behind his ear and turned it over in his fingers. He did that when he was frightened. They want to put their own men on our corners, he said, not for numbers. Nobody spoke. The radiator ticked in the corner. Somebody upstairs was practicing scales on a horn badly, the same 4 notes over and over. Say the word, Junebug said. Powder, Deacon said. Bumpy Johnson had not said anything yet. He was standing at the window with his back to the room, looking down at the street. A woman in a green coat was walking 2 children home. One of the children was dragging a stick along the iron railings. Tick, tick, tick. How many men? He asked. Deacon opened the hymnal. He read from a pencil list on the inside cover. 9, he said. 9 collectors. 9 names. That's their whole shop above the park. Bumpy Johnson turned around. Then it's 9, he said, and that was the first time the number entered the room. The 9 were not soldiers in the storybook sense. They were a business. There was a bookkeeper. There was a man who owned 2 laundries and used them the way a bank uses a vault. There was a pair of brothers who ran the collection routes. There was a bailman. There was a fixer who knew a captain at the precinct. There was a customs clerk's cousin at the West Side Piers. There was a driver, and there was Vincent Corsaro. They called him Vinnie Palms. Some said it was because he greased them. Some said it was because his hands sweated so badly he kept a handkerchief in each pocket. Both stories were true, which is rare. Corsaro was 38. He had a good tailor and a bad temper and a habit of laughing before the end of his own jokes. He talked a great deal. He talked when he was winning and he talked more when he was losing, and he had never once noticed the difference. He wanted Harlem the way a man wants a house he has only seen from the sidewalk. He did not want to run it. He wanted to be seen owning it. That vanity was the crack. Bumpy Johnson found it in the first 10 minutes of their first conversation. They met on a Thursday upstairs at a place on 7th with a view of the avenue. Corsaro brought 2 men. He sat without being asked. He ordered for the table. You've been away, he said. Things moved. Things always move, said Bumpy Johnson. So we understand each other. Not yet, Corsaro laughed. He looked at his men so they would laugh too. They did. 35%, he said. And my people work the corners. Everybody eats. Not everybody. Who doesn't eat? The corners, Bumpy said. Corsaro wiped his palms on his handkerchief. He did it without noticing, the way some men touch their tie. You know what your trouble is, he said. You think this is a neighborhood. It's a market. Bumpy Johnson looked at him for a long moment. Down on the avenue, a bus sighed to a stop. Somebody was selling hot peanuts. The smell came up through the open window, sweet and burnt. Give me 30 days, he said. For what? To show you the arithmetic. Corsaro smiled. He thought he had won something. That was the difference between them. One man measured a meeting by what he took out of it. The other measured it by what he had learned. Corsaro left believing he had been granted a delay. He had actually been handed a countdown. That night, Bumpy Johnson walked home alone. He did that more often than his people liked. He said a man who cannot walk his own street does not own it. The wind came off the Harlem River, cold ahead of schedule. A newsstand on the corner had the Amsterdam News stacked and weighted with a brick. Two detectives from the 32nd Precinct sat in a parked sedan eating sandwiches. One of them raised 2 fingers off the wheel. He nodded back. Somewhere above him a window was open and a woman was playing piano, slow, unhurried, a song about waiting. He passed a shoeshine stand shutting down for the night. The old man was capping his Polish tins. That smell reached him, wax and turpentine and old leather. And just like that, he was 7 years old. Charleston, South Carolina, 1912. Summer heat that pressed down on you like a hand between the shoulder blades. The Johnson house smelled of starch and boiled greens. His mother took in washing. His father worked when there was work and there was rarely enough. There was a shoeshine box under the porch steps. It belonged to his brother, but Ellsworth used it more. He liked the ritual, the brush, the cloth, the snap of the rag. He liked being paid. On a Saturday, his father took him downtown to a dry goods store on King Street. They needed thread and a length of muslin. His mother had counted out the money at the kitchen table 3 times. Ellsworth carried it in his fist the whole way. The coins got warm and slick. Inside, the store was dim and cool and smelled of tobacco and cedar. The clerk took his time. He served 2 men who came in after them, then a woman. Then he wrote something in a ledger and looked out the window for a while. Ellsworth's father did not say anything. He stood with his hat in both hands. He stood the way a man stands in church. Finally, the clerk came over. He named a price that was not the price on the sign. Ellsworth opened his mouth. His father's hand landed on his shoulder. Not hard, just there. The boy closed his mouth. They paid. They took the thread and the muslin. The clerk counted the change into the counter instead of into his father's hand. The coins rattled on the wood. That sound stayed with Ellsworth Johnson for 60 years. Outside, the sun was white and the street was loud. His father put his hat back on. They walked 2 blocks without speaking. "You wanted to say something," his father said. "He cheated us." "He did." "Then why didn't we say it?" His father stopped walking. He crouched down so their eyes were level. There was gray in his beard that the boy had not noticed before. "Because saying it costs a nickel," his father said, "and knowing it is free." Ellsworth did not understand, not that day. That night after supper, his father called him to the porch. The cicadas were going. The heat had not broken. A dog was barking 3 houses down. His father took a silver dollar out of his pocket. It was old even then. The eagle on the back was worn nearly flat. The edges were soft from 30 years of pockets and palms. "This was my father's," he said. He handed it to the boy. It was heavier than Ellsworth expected, heavier than a coin has any business being. Warm from his father's pocket, cool on the underside. "Look at the wing," his father said. There was a small X scratched into the eagle's wing, not deep, deliberate. "He filed that in himself," his father said, "so he'd know it if it ever came back to him." "Did it come back?" "Twice." The boy turned the coin over and over. The X caught the porch light. "A dollar buys a dollar," his father said. "That's all it can do. But a marked dollar tells you where it's been, and that's worth more." He tapped the boy's chest. "Most men count money," he said. "Learn to count men." Ellsworth held that coin in both hands. He made himself a promise on that porch. He did not say it out loud. He promised that nobody would ever count change onto a counter in front of him again, not into wood, into his hand. He kept that promise for the rest of his life, and it cost him more than he ever admitted. He carried the coin north when the family left Charleston. He carried it through the 20s, through the Renaissance ballroom, through the numbers wars, through 2 prison terms. He never spent it. He rubbed it with his thumb when he was thinking. The X had gone soft under 37 years of that thumb. The shoeshine man on Lenox capped his last tin and looked up. "Evening, Mr. Johnson." "Evening. Cold coming?" "It is." Bumpy Johnson walked on with his hand in his vest pocket, holding a warm silver dollar, thinking about arithmetic. He had 3 weeks of preparation to do in 6 days. The plan came together in a kitchen at 2 in the morning. Mamie made coffee because nobody was going to sleep. Deacon spread butcher paper across the table. Junebug sat backwards on a chair, and Sparrow came in through the fire escape because Sparrow always came in through the fire escape. Her name was Adelaide Rennick. She was 24. She had run policy slips since she was old enough to be invisible, and she had never been caught because she was faster than the neighborhood was interested. She wore a red scarf tied at her throat. She whistled 2 notes when she entered a room so nobody would be startled. She also knew every super, every doorman, every dishwasher, and every night porter between 110th and 155th. She sat on the radiator and swung her feet. "You want the 9 names," she said. "I want more than names," Bumpy said, "such as where they eat, who they owe, who they're afraid of." Sparrow grinned. "That's a 2-week job. You have 6 days." She stopped swinging her feet. "Then I want a raise," she said. "You'll get one." "I want it in writing." Deacon looked up in horror. Nobody put anything in writing. Bumpy Johnson laughed. It was a real laugh, brief and low. "You'll get a handshake," he said. "It's better." The 4th man arrived at 3 in the morning, smelling of chalk and old paper. Amos Lyle. Everyone called him Professor. He had taught mathematics at a high school in Baltimore until an argument with a principal ended that career. Now he kept books, not the fake books, the real ones. He had ink on his fingers permanently. He cleaned his glasses on his tie every 2 minutes, whether or not they were dirty. "You want an audit," he said. "I want a map," Bumpy said. "Of what?" "Of their money." Professor sat down. He cleaned his glasses. "Their money isn't in Harlem," he said. "That's the thing nobody says out loud. They collect here. They keep it downtown. Laundries, a trucking outfit, 2 buildings in Queens. Which means they're guests." He put his glasses back on. "Guests can be embarrassed." Bumpy Johnson looked at the butcher paper for a long time. Then he took the marked silver dollar from his pocket and set it in the middle of the table. It made a small flat sound on the wood. "There are 9 of them," he said. 9 men above the park." "9," Deacon agreed. "How many of the 9 trust each other?" Nobody answered. "That's the number that matters," Bumpy said. He tapped the coin once. "I'm going to give them a door," he said. "1 door, only 1 man fits through it." Junebug frowned. "And the other 8? We'll spend 30 days watching each other." Silence in the kitchen. The radiator clanked twice. Mamie at the stove did not turn around. Professor started to smile. It was not a comfortable smile. It was the smile of a man who has just seen a proof written on a blackboard and understood that it cannot be argued with. "That's cruel," he said. "It's cheaper than the alternative," said Bumpy Johnson. "Cheaper for who?" "For everybody." Here is what he understood that Corsaro did not. 9 men working together are a wall. 9 men who each believe there is 1 seat left on the last train are 9 men alone. You do not have to knock the wall down. You only have to convince every brick that the mortar is lying. Sparrow came back on the fourth day with a list. She recited it from memory because she never wrote anything down. The bookkeeper had a gambling problem in Saratoga. The laundryman had a brother-in-law under indictment. The two collection brothers had not spoken in 11 months over a woman. The bailman was 3 payments behind on a house in Yonkers. The precinct fixer had recently been transferred, and his captain had retired to Florida in June, which meant his value had quietly gone to 0 and he had not told anyone. The pier man had a green card problem. The driver was 19 years old and terrified, and Vincent Corsaro had a problem bigger than all of them. "He's not sanctioned," Sparrow said. Deacon looked up. "Say that again." "Downtown didn't send him, he volunteered." She shrugged. "He told them he could deliver Harlem quiet. He put his own name on it." Professor set down his pen. "He's running a franchise," he said, "not an army." "So if he can't deliver quiet," Junebug said slowly. "Then he isn't a partner," Bumpy said. "He's a liability." He walked to the window. Down on the avenue, a church van was double parked. 2 women were carrying folding chairs into a storefront sanctuary. One of them was laughing at something the other had said. The whole plan rearranged itself in his head in the space of 10 seconds. He did not need to beat 9 men. He needed to make 9 men expensive. That was the entire war. 30 days, he said to the window. Nobody asked why 30. 30 days was how long a rumor took to travel from Lenox Avenue to Mulberry Street sour and travel back. He knew that because he had timed it once in 1936, for reasons he never explained to anybody. Now the invitation. He sent it the old way, not a phone call, a message carried by a man in a good coat. Small's Paradise. October 4th, 9 o'clock. Corsaro would come because Corsaro could not resist being seen at a table in Harlem. Vanity is the only appointment a proud man never misses. The night before, Mamie found him sitting on the edge of the bed with his shoes still on. The bedroom was dark except for the streetlight coming through the curtain. It made a long yellow bar across the floor. Radiator heat. Too much of it, the way it always was in October before anyone learned the building's temper. She sat down beside him. "You haven't eaten," she said. "I ate." "Coffee is not food, Ellsworth." He almost smiled. She was the only person alive who used that name without flinching. On the windowsill there was a small silver thimble. She kept it there because she did her mending by the window in the afternoon light. He reached over and picked it up. He turned it in his fingers. Cool metal, dented on one side. Worn thin at the crown from 20 years of pushing needles through other people's clothes. "You've been quiet 3 days," she said. "I've been thinking." "That's what I said." He set the thimble down. "You know what I'm going to do?" he asked. "No," she said. "And I've noticed you haven't offered." Outside, a car door closed. Somebody called a name down the block and nobody answered. "It won't be blood," he said. "That's not what worries me." He turned to look at her. Mamie Johnson was not a woman who cried at the right moments. She saved it for later alone, which was worse. "You think I'm afraid they'll kill you," she said. "Aren't you?" "I've been afraid of that since the day I met you. That fear's got a chair in this house. It's got a name." She smoothed the bedspread with one hand. "That's not the new one." "Then say the new one." She took her time. "You're not afraid of losing," she said. "You're afraid of how good you are at this." He did not answer. "You've been sitting here 3 days looking like a man doing long division," she said. "And you're enjoying it, and you know you're enjoying it, and you don't know what that makes you." The radiator hissed. He picked up the thimble again. He put it down again. "They want to sell powder on Convent Avenue," he said quietly. 2 blocks from a school. I know what they want. Then you know I have to. I didn't say you didn't. She stood up. I said you were enjoying it. She went to the door. She stopped there with her hand on the frame. Come to bed, she said, or don't, but take your shoes off in my house. She left the door open. That was the whole scene. Nobody won it. He sat there another hour in the dark, holding a silver dollar in one hand, listening to the pipes. Then he took off his shoes. Small's Paradise on a Tuesday night was a good room. White tablecloths, waiters who could carry 7 plates, a band that played tight and did not overplay. The air was warm and thick. Cigarette smoke, perfume, fried fish from the kitchen. Somebody's cologne applied with more enthusiasm than judgment. Bumpy Johnson arrived at 8:40. He sat with his back to the wall facing the door, the way he always did. Junebug stood near the coat room. Sparrow was at the bar wearing a dress she hated. Deacon sat 2 tables away with his hymnal on his knee, moving his lips over numbers. Professor stayed home. He was not a room man, and everyone knew it. Corsaro came in at 9:15 because being late was the only power he was sure of. He brought 4 of his 9. He greeted the maitre d' too loudly. He touched a stranger's shoulder as he passed. He looked around the room the way a man looks at a car he is thinking about buying. He sat down across from Bumpy Johnson without being invited. Nice room, he said. It is. Bigger than it looks from outside. Most things are. Corsaro waved for a drink. He got one fast. So, he said, the arithmetic. Bumpy Johnson folded his hands on the table. 35% takes 40 cents out of every payout, he said. The bankers can't cover. They shave the payouts. The players notice in a week. They'll play anyway. They will not. They always play. They play because they believe it's honest. Bumpy's voice did not rise. Take the honesty out and you don't have a market. You have a rumor. Corsaro laughed and looked at his men. They laughed. You give a lot of speeches for a quiet guy, he said. That's my last one. Good. Corsaro leaned back. Because here's mine. I don't need Harlem's permission. I need Harlem's address. He reached into his pocket and took out a coin. A quarter. Nothing special. He held it up between 2 fingers so the stage light caught it. Tell you what, he said. Sporting man like you. Let's flip for the percentage. The band was between numbers. Somebody in the kitchen dropped a tray of silverware. Heads 35, Corsaro said. Tails 30. He grinned wide. Call it in the air. And he flipped it. Time slowed. The quarter rose out of his hand. It turned once through the smoke. It caught the blue light off the bandstand. A waitress stopped with a tray against her hip. Deacon's pencil stopped moving. 40 people in that room understood all at once exactly what was being said, not a bet. A man flipping a coin over a black-owned table in a black-owned room, deciding what Harlem was worth on the way down. Bumpy Johnson's hand came up. He did not snatch at it. He caught it flat the way you catch a fly ball you have been watching the whole way. Slap. He did not look at the coin. He set it face down on the tablecloth and left his fingers on it. I don't gamble, he said. Corsaro's grin flickered. Everybody gambles. No. He slid the quarter back across the table. Some of us count. Then he reached into his vest pocket. The silver dollar came out warm. He held it up so the light could find the worn X on the eagle's wing. You see this mark? Corsaro squinted. Yeah. My grandfather filed it so he'd know the coin if it came back. That's a nice story. It's not a story, it's a system. He reached across the table and put the dollar in Corsaro's hand. He closed the man's fingers over it, the way you close a fist around a secret. Corsaro's palm was damp. The coin stuck to it. That coin is a door, said Bumpy Johnson. A door. There are 9 of you above the park. 9 men, I counted. Corsaro's smile went strange around the edges. In 30 days, 8 of you will be gone from Harlem, Bumpy said. You have my word that not one of you will be harmed by me or by mine. That's a big promise. It's the only kind I make. He tapped the back of Corsaro's fist. The man holding that coin walks out clean. He keeps what he's earned. Nobody follows him. Nobody remembers his name. He leaned back. 1 coin, 9 men, 30 days. Corsaro laughed, but it came out half a beat late. And if I throw this in the river, then you've thrown away the only door. Corsaro opened his hand and looked at the dollar. Heavy, warm, soft-edged, that small X worn nearly to nothing, catching the blue light. He should have thrown it in the river. He put it in his pocket, and here is the thing that made it work. Bumpy Johnson said all of that in a room with 40 witnesses. By 11 o'clock, 6 of the 9 had heard about it. By noon the next day, all 9 had. He never had to tell them anything again. Harlem told them. That is the part people misunderstand about that autumn. There was no war. There was a rumor with excellent distribution. Day 1. Sparrow was on the street before dawn. She did not spread lies. Bumpy had been specific about that. A lie can be corrected, he told her. The truth just sits there. So she spread facts, small ones, placed carefully. She told a barber that the bail man was behind on his house in Yonkers. She told a hotel porter that the bookkeeper had a bad week upstate. She told a dishwasher that the precinct captain who protected all of them had retired to Florida in June. That one traveled fastest because it was the one that mattered and because it was completely true. By day 3, the 9 men were checking on each other. By day 4, 2 of them had stopped answering the phone. Day 6. Deacon Boyd came to the barbershop back room with his hat in his hands. He was gray in the face. They came to the bank, he said. Which bank? Mine, on 145th. Bumpy stood up. Anybody hurt? No. Deacon sat down. That's what I'm telling you. Nobody touched nothing. They came in, they looked around, they left. They were counting. Counting what? How much of Harlem still works without them? Junebug spat a peppermint into his hand. That's a warning. It's a survey, said Bumpy Johnson. Warnings are loud. Day 8 brought the first crack. The 2 collection brothers, the ones who had not spoken in 11 months, had an argument on 125th Street outside a shoe store. It was not a private argument. 40 people saw it. One of them was a woman who wrote a social column and had a very good memory. The younger brother accused the older of asking about the coin. The older brother denied it and then, unfortunately for him, asked about the coin. They were separated by a traffic cop. Sparrow reported it that night sitting on the radiator, swinging her feet. They called each other names in the street like 2 boys, she said. Half the block was watching. Did anybody laugh? She looked at him strangely. Yeah, she said. A lot of people laughed. Bumpy Johnson nodded slowly. Then it's working, he said. Because they fought? Because they were funny. He picked up his coffee. You can be feared, you cannot be feared and funny, pick one. Day 11, the first disappearance. The bailman from Yonkers did not vanish in a dramatic way. He simply did not come into the city. Professor found out why because Professor read things nobody else bothered to read. A foreclosure notice in a legal supplement. 6 lines of small type. His house went, Professor said. 2nd mortgage. He borrowed against it in June. Borrowed from who? Professor cleaned his glasses. From the bookkeeper, he said. Everyone in the room understood at once. One of the 9 had been lending money to another of the 9. At interest, quietly. Deacon started to laugh and then stopped himself because he was a deacon. They've been eating each other since summer, Junebug said. They've been hungry since summer, Bumpy said. That's different. He turned to Professor. Can you prove the loan? On paper, maybe. Why? Because I want the other 7 to know. Sparrow was already standing up, 2 down. Well, 1 down and 1 bleeding. 28 men days remained. Bumpy Johnson counted them the way his father had counted change. Slowly, out loud, into his own palm. Day 13. Corsaro made his move, and it was better than anyone expected. That is the part of this story people leave out. They make Corsaro a fool. He was not a fool. He was loud, which is a different disease. He went to a man in the Bronx who did delicate metal work, watch cases, cigarette lighters, occasionally things that were not exactly legal. He had the man look at the silver dollar under a jeweler's loupe. Then he ordered 9 copies. 9 old silver dollars, each with a small X filed across the eagle's wing. He paid $200 for the work and considered it the best money he had ever spent. Then he called his men together in a back room in the East 80s. He put the 9 coins on the table. He gave me a door, he said, so I made 9 doors. He handed 1 to each man. Nobody's going anywhere, he told them. We stand together, we all walk out of this. The men picked up the coins. They turned them in the light. And Vincent Corsaro made the only real mistake of his career. He kept the real one. He did not tell them which was which. He simply kept the original in his vest pocket, warm against his chest, because some part of him believed it was worth something. Vanity again. The same appointment kept twice. The news reached Harlem in 2 days, because a jeweler in the Bronx has customers and customers talk. Junebug slammed his hand on the table. He copied it. Yes, that kills the whole thing. No, said Bumpy Johnson. He was standing at the window again. It had rained. The avenue was black and shining, and the streetlights were smeared across it. Explain it, Deacon said, because I don't see it. Bumpy turned around. Before today, 8 of them believed they were going to lose, he said. Now 9 of them believe they're going to win. That's worse. That's better. He walked to the table. A frightened man hides. A confident man moves. Professor set down his pen very slowly. They'll all start moving, he said. Every one of them, cars, meetings, money. Bumpy tapped the butcher paper. 9 men in motion at the same time. Sparrow started to grin. And motion leaves tracks, she said. Motion leaves witnesses, Bumpy corrected. Tracks wash off. He looked around the room. Gentlemen, he said, he didn't make 9 doors, he made 9 addresses. Here is what he had understood standing at that rain-smeared window. The coin was never the weapon. The coin was a mirror. 9 men had looked into it and seen exactly what they already believed about themselves. That is all a mirror can do. That is all it ever has to do. Day 15, the midpoint, and the worst night of the 30. Bumpy Johnson came home at 1 in the morning, and Deacon Willie Boyd was sitting on the stoop of his building. 61 years old, in the cold with his hymnal in his lap. He did not get up. Deacon, sit with me a minute. He sat, iron railing cold through his coat sleeve, wind coming down the block, pushing a newspaper along the gutter 1 page at a time. Deacon opened the hymnal. Between the pages where the ribbon marker sat, there was a silver dollar. Old, worn, a small X filed into the eagle's wing. Neither man said anything for a while. Wednesday, Deacon said finally. Man came to my sister's house in Mount Vernon, not to my house, hers. Was she home? She made him coffee. His voice cracked on it. She made that man coffee, Ellsworth, and she didn't know. He turned the coin over with his thumb. He said, if I hold this, my family's out of it. Whatever happens. He said I'd be the one. And you believed him. I wanted to. Deacon looked up. His eyes were wet and furious. I'm too old to be brave twice in one lifetime. Bumpy Johnson took the coin from the hymnal. He held it up to the streetlight and turned it slowly. The X was in the wrong place, a half millimeter too high, and the file marks ran the wrong direction because the Bronx man was right-handed and his grandfather had not been. It's a copy, he said. Deacon closed his eyes. I know, he said. I knew Thursday. Then why keep it? Because I wanted to see if you'd forgive me for it. The wind came down the block again. Somewhere a long way off, a trumpet was going, thin and lonely, somebody practicing at 1 a.m. because that was the only time they had. Bumpy Johnson pressed the fake coin back into the old man's hand. Keep it, he said. Why? Because on the 30th day they're going to ask who has one. He stood up. I want you to be able to show them. Deacon looked at the coin, then at him. You're not angry? No. Why not? Because you told me, said Bumpy Johnson. 8 men out there are holding the same coin and lying about it. He put his hand on the old man's shoulder briefly. Go home to your sister, he said. Take the train, not the car. Then he went upstairs, sat on the edge of the bed with his shoes on, and stayed there until the sky went gray. Mamie did not ask. That was the mercy she had. She knew when a question was a wait. Day 16. The strategy changed. Bumpy Johnson stopped defending Harlem and started documenting it. Professor was given a room, a desk, 3 lamps, and no interruptions. He built what he called the ledger, not a book of numbers. A book of names, 9 men. Every property, every relative, every registered vehicle, every business license, every court appearance, every loan, every partner, every date. Sparrow fed it. Porters, waiters, elevator men, laundry women, a night watchman at a garage on Amsterdam, a clerk at the county register who had a nephew in trouble. Nobody committed a crime. That was the discipline. They read public records. They remembered conversations. They noticed license plates. You know what this is, Professor said on the 4th night, rubbing his eyes. Tell me. It's a newspaper. He gestured at the pages. It's just a newspaper nobody's printed yet. Bumpy Johnson looked at the desk for a long moment. Then let's find a printer, he said. Day 19. Corsaro's 9 men were moving exactly as predicted. Each of them believed he held the real coin. Each of them had begun, quietly, to prepare an exit. The laundryman started shifting money out of the business, which his brother-in-law's lawyer noticed, because lawyers notice. The bookkeeper drove to Saratoga twice in 1 week, which the garage on Amsterdam noticed, because garages notice mileage. The older collection brother rented a room in Newark under a false name. The younger brother found out and told 2 people, one of whom was a barber, which meant he had told the entire world. The pier man began asking about paperwork, green card paperwork, loudly, to the wrong people. The precinct fixer, whose captain had retired to Florida in June, tried to buy new protection with money he did not have. The 19-year-old driver simply stopped showing up. He went home to Providence. He was the first of the 9 to leave Harlem, and he left because he was young enough to be honest with himself. 1 gone, 8 to go, 11 days left, day 21. Bumpy Johnson met a newspaperman in a booth at a coffee shop on 126th Street. The man was young. He wrote 3 columns a week, and half of them were about church suppers, and he had ambition the way some people have a limp. He kept looking at the door. You want me to print names, he said. I want you to print facts. That's the same thing when the facts are names. The coffee came. It was too hot and too strong, and it tasted like a metal spoon. Bumpy Johnson wrapped both hands around the cup. 9 men are collecting money above 110th Street, he said. None of them live here, none of them bank here, none of them are from here. That's not news. Their addresses are. The young man went quiet. You know what happens to me, he said. Nothing happens to you. You can't promise that. I can promise the other thing, Bumpy said. If you don't print it in a year, there'll be powder on Convent Avenue, and you'll write about that instead, every week for 20 years. Outside, a bus went by. The window shook in its frame. The young man turned his coffee cup a half turn on the saucer. Just facts, he said. No adjectives. No adjectives, Bumpy agreed. Where do I get it? A man will bring you a folder. He'll smell like chalk. Day 22. The second visit was harder because it happened downtown, in a building with marble floors and a smell of floor polish and old paper. An assistant district attorney named Miriam Vance had been trying for 2 years to get anybody in Harlem to say anything to her about anything. She had gotten nowhere, and she understood exactly why, which was rarer than it should have been. A man she did not know left an envelope with her clerk. Inside were 4 pages, typewritten, no signature, property records, vehicle registrations, 2 loan agreements, a list of 9 names with a column of dates beside them. Everything in it was public. That was the beauty of it. Every single item could be verified by a law student in an afternoon. Somebody had just done 400 hours of work for her for free and asked for nothing. She read it twice. Then she called her investigator in and said the sentence that ended the whole arrangement above 110th Street. Start with the pier, she said. Day 24. The column ran on a Saturday. Page 9. It was 400 words long. No adjectives. It listed 9 men. It listed where they lived, which was Queens, Yonkers, the East 80s, and Fort Lee, New Jersey. It listed how much money left Harlem every week, based on figures the reporter described as an estimate from a person familiar with the trade. It ended with a single question. Whose neighborhood is this? Harlem read it over breakfast. Harlem read it in barbershops and beauty shops and on the bus and outside Bloomstein's, where the checkers game stopped for 40 minutes. Harlem read it in the pews on Sunday, folded inside the bulletin, which several ministers noticed and pretended not to. Nobody rioted, nobody marched. Something quieter happened, and it was worse for the 9. Doors stopped opening. A collector knocked and nobody answered, and the collector knew there were people inside because he could hear a radio. A bar owner discovered he was out of the brand a certain man drank. Permanently. A garage was suddenly booked solid. A landlord, very politely, could not renew. 2 women who cleaned an office in the East 80s gave notice on the same morning and did not explain. You cannot threaten a neighborhood that has decided to be busy. Day 26. The pier man was picked up on a Tuesday morning at 7 in front of a coffee cart holding a paper cup. It was not dramatic. 2 men in suits, a car door, 12 seconds. It was an immigration matter, which is the quietest kind of matter there is. He was gone from Harlem by Thursday and out of the country by the following spring. 2. The bookkeeper went next, and he went the worst way for a man like him. He went voluntarily. He walked into the building with the marble floors on a Wednesday afternoon with a lawyer beside him and asked what could be arranged. By Friday, everyone knew. Nothing empties a room like a man who has started talking. 3. The precinct fixer left on Saturday in a car with his mother-in-law's furniture strapped to the roof. His protection had retired to Florida in June, and now everyone knew that too. And a man who sells something he does not have cannot stay where the buyers live. 4. The laundryman was 5th, and his exit was almost polite. He sold both laundries in 9 days at a loss and moved to Philadelphia, where he opened, of all things, a laundry. 5. The older collection brother was arrested in Newark on a matter that had nothing to do with Harlem. An old bench warrant 3 years cold that somebody had finally bothered to look up. 6. The younger brother, who had told a barber everything, discovered that everyone he knew had heard everything. He left on a bus. He did not say goodbye to anyone because there was nobody left who would take the call. 7. The bail man from Yonkers was already gone. He had lost his house on day 11 and he never came back over the bridge. 8. 8 men, 29 days, and 1 left. Vincent Corsaro sat in a back room in the East 80s on the 29th night with a phone that had stopped ringing. He had put his own name on this. Sparrow had been right about that from the beginning. He had told the people downtown that he could deliver Harlem quiet. Instead, he had delivered a newspaper column, a grand jury, a deportation, a man who was talking to a district attorney, and 8 empty chairs. Nobody threatened him. That was the thing that frightened him most. They simply stopped inviting him. His lawyer was busy, his barber was booked. A man he had known for 15 years crossed 2nd Avenue rather than pass him on the sidewalk. Corsaro sat in that back room and took the silver dollar out of his vest pocket. He had carried it for 29 days. The metal had gone warm against his chest, the way it must have been warm in another man's pocket for 37 years, and in another man's pocket before that. He turned it over. The X on the eagle's wing was soft and old and correct. He knew then what he had been holding since October 4th. Not a door, a receipt, day 30, November 3rd, 1949, Small's Paradise, 9 o'clock. The band was playing something slow. The room was warm and full, fried fish and cigarette smoke and a woman's perfume that arrived a second before she did. Bumpy Johnson sat with his back to the wall, facing the door. Junebug by the coat room, peppermint in his cheek. Sparrow at the bar, red scarf, watching the mirror instead of the room. Deacon 2 tables away, hymnal on his knee. A fake silver dollar tucked between the pages of the 23rd Psalm. Corsaro came in alone. No men, no coat check flourish. He did not greet the maitre d'. He crossed the room and stood at the table. Nobody in that room said a word, but the room noticed. Rooms always do. "Sit down," said Bumpy Johnson. "I'll stand." "Sit down anyway." He sat. The waiter came. Bumpy ordered coffee for 2, which was its own kind of sentence. Corsaro's hands were on the table. He was not wiping them. That was new. 8, he said. 9, Bumpy said. "You're still here." "They pulled my name off everything." Corsaro laughed, and there was nothing in it. 15 years, 1 month, 30 days. "Yeah," he looked up. 30 days. The coffee came. Neither of them touched it. "You never sent anybody," Corsaro said. "Not one man, not a scratch." "No. Why not?" Bumpy Johnson considered the question seriously, because it was the only serious question Corsaro had ever asked him. "Because a dead man is a story," he said, "and a story brings 10 more of you." He turned his cup a half-turn on the saucer. "A ruined man is arithmetic," he said. "Nobody avenges arithmetic." Corsaro stared at the tablecloth. "They're saying downtown I got beat by a rumor. You got beat by a ledger. Same thing to them, not to me." Corsaro reached into his vest pocket. Time slowed. The silver dollar came out into the light. It turned once between his fingers. The X caught the blue glow from the bandstand. A waitress stopped with a tray against her hip. Deacon's pencil stopped moving. Corsaro held it a second longer than he needed to. Then he opened his hand and let it fall. Clink. It landed on the tablecloth, bounced once and settled flat against the linen, eagle up. The same sound as change on a counter in Charleston, South Carolina in 1912. Bumpy Johnson looked at it for a long moment. Then he picked it up and put it in his vest pocket. "You said the man holding it walks out clean," Corsaro said. "I did." "I'm giving it back. I know." Why does that feel worse? Because you understand what it cost, Bumpy said. 8 men didn't. Corsaro stood up. He straightened his jacket out of habit. He looked around the room one last time, at the tablecloths and the band and the warm, smoky air. He had wanted to be seen owning this. Now he was just a man leaving a restaurant. I never even got a piece of it, he said. No, said Bumpy Johnson. You got the whole thing for 30 days in your head. Corsaro walked out. He did not come back to Harlem. Not that year, not ever. 9 men who had been collecting above 110th Street on October 4th. By the first week of November, not one of them was on those streets. One went home to Providence at 19 and got a job at a shipyard. One went to a federal detention room and then across an ocean. One went to a district attorney with a lawyer and a list. One went to Florida chasing a captain who had already retired. One opened a laundry in Philadelphia. One went to a cell in New Jersey on a warrant 3 years old. One went out on a bus with nobody to call. One lost a house in Yonkers and never crossed the bridge again. And one set a silver dollar down on a white tablecloth and walked out of a room that had stopped looking at him. Nobody was harmed. That was the part the storytellers always changed, because the truth was harder to dramatize and much harder to argue with. The tax on the Harlem banks did not go to 35% that winter. It went to nothing for 11 weeks, because there was nobody left to collect it. 11 weeks is not forever. Bumpy Johnson never pretended it was. Other men came later with other arrangements. They always did. That was the arithmetic of the century, not of a season. But for 11 weeks in the winter of 1949, every dollar that came out of a Harlem kitchen stayed in Harlem. And no corner on Convent Avenue ever sold what those 9 men wanted it to sell. Not that year. There was one more scene, and it happened in a kitchen. Bumpy Johnson came home on the 30th night, and Mamie was awake, sitting at the table with the lamp on, mending a hem. She did not ask. He took the silver dollar out of his vest pocket and set it on the table beside her silver thimble. 2 small pieces of worn metal under a lamp. One had pushed a needle through 10,000 seams. The other had been counted onto a counter in Charleston and carried north in a boy's fist and given away for 30 days and come back. She looked at them both. "Is it finished?" she said. "For now." "That's not an answer. It's the only true one." She picked up the coin. She turned it over. She rubbed the X with her thumb the same way he did without knowing she was doing it. "Were you right?" she said. "About enjoying it?" He sat down across from her. "Yes," he said. She nodded slowly. She put the coin down. "Then keep telling me," she said, out loud, so it stays a thing you know. She went back to her mending. He sat there and watched her hands work, and the radiator clanked twice. And somewhere down the block a car door closed and nobody called a name. He kept that coin for the rest of his life. His daughter remembered it. His friends remembered it. It came out of that vest pocket in 1,000 back rooms, and he turned it over in his fingers while other men talked themselves into corners. Most of them never asked about it. The ones who did got a short answer. "It came back," he would say, and then he would put it away. So what actually happened in those 30 days? No war, no parade, no bodies in the river. One man handed another man a coin in a crowded room and told the truth in front of 40 witnesses. Everything after that was gravity. Understand the trick, because it was never a trick. He did not divide 9 men. 9 men were already divided. They just had not been offered a reason to notice. He did not destroy Vincent Corsaro. Corsaro walked into Harlem carrying his own destruction in his mouth and set it on the table himself, and he did not save Harlem. Nobody saves a neighborhood. You can only buy a time, and time is the most expensive thing there is. Here is what Bumpy Johnson understood that autumn, and it is the whole lesson. Violence is a loan. It always comes due with interest at the worst possible hour. Information is a purchase. You own it forever. His father knew that on a sidewalk in Charleston with his hat in both hands, on a day when saying it would have cost a nickel and knowing it was free. His grandfather knew it when he took a file to the wing of an eagle so $1 would tell him where it had been. A marked coin does not stop a man from stealing. It only makes it impossible for him to pretend he didn't. That is all Harlem ever needed. Not vengeance, daylight, 9 men, 30 days, 1 coin, not 1 shot fired. Picture the last image because it is the same as the first. Small's Paradise, 7th Avenue, blue light off the bandstand, smoke turning slow in the air above white tablecloths, a silver dollar catching that light for half a second, but it is not spinning this time. It is lying flat, eagle up on the linen. Warm, worn soft, marked with a small X that a man filed in by hand in another century so he would know his own when it came home. A hand closes over it. The band starts a new number. And Bumpy Johnson puts the coin back in his pocket where it lived and where it stayed. He did not raise his voice once in 30 days. He never had to raise it again. Because power is not what you take from a man. Power is what he hands you in a crowded room to make the counting stop. That was the way Bumpy Johnson worked, not with noise, with arithmetic. And that's where the story ends. But the stories of Harlem don't. If you enjoy the untold stories, the forgotten moments, and the legends that shaped an era, make sure you subscribe to The World of Bumpy Johnson. New stories are coming, and some of them are even harder to believe than this one. Until next time, keep listening, keep questioning, and remember, every legend has a story.